Hello, and thank you for watching our first video on practical tips and techniques for IBMi Modernization. My name is Jeffrey, and I'm a senior DevOps developer on the Treeline Solutions team. Today's topic, using FileZilla with your IBMi. When learning something new in the modern, it's always a good idea to begin with understanding the basic concepts behind it. What is FTP? Well, FTP is simply an agreed upon standard for transferring files between two computers on a network. You can use FTP on your IBMi system to send, receive, and share files across networks. One caveat is that TCP/IP must be configured and started on your IBMi system. Now that we have a basic understanding of the concept of FTP, simply to transfer files between two computers, let's take a look at how we can take advantage of it. What is FileZilla? Well, FileZilla is a commonly used open source FTP client. It provides a graphical user interface that supports drag and drop functionality. It's a much easier interface than using the command line FTP on the PC or on the IBMi in Q shell, especially if you consistently transfer multiple files to and from the IFS. The FTP FileZilla client supports FTP, FTP over TLS, FTPS, and SFTP. FileZilla is an open source software distributed free of charge. And there's a pro version available if you need additional protocols supported for your cloud storage, like Amazon, Backblaze, Dropbox, Google Drive, services such as this. So let's go to the FileZilla website and download and install FileZilla and start FTPing to our IBMi. Let's open up our browser and go to the FileZilla webpage. As you can see, there's lots of information on this site. I would encourage everybody to dig in there deeper. There's documentation, there's information about the pro version, there is a forum and a wiki, lots of great information. For now, we're just going to go ahead and download the client. If you're running Windows, it's an easy click. Otherwise, you might have to drill a little bit further to find the install for your platform. You can see the comparisons between the open source and the FileZilla Pro. There might be some additional functionality that you could use. We're just going to download the free version. When the installer finishes, we'll open it up. It's a pretty standard install. You can select all the defaults. I already have FileZilla loaded onto my system, so I will get a update message. And it should come up here in a moment. There is one thing to watch out for. There's some free trial versions embedded in this install, and if you accidentally click accept like I just did, you're going to get something installed. I'll have to go back and remove that, but just hit decline on these and you should be able to get through it. So we'll let the installer finish, and it will open up FileZilla. And now we have FileZilla installed. Let's go to the next step so we can get connected to our IBMi. So before we continue, I want to cover a couple of concepts. The first is the caveat to using FileZilla with your IBMi. You have to make sure that your FTP server is started. Very simple command, start TCP server, and then you would select the type, which in this case is FTP. Can do the same if you need to start your HTTP server. If the server's already started, it will give you a message telling you that the server started. But that's it. That will make sure that the FileZilla can connect. Another important concept to highlight is the name format. By default, OS 400 uses the traditional naming file conventions. We know them as star lib naming format. FTP also supports IBMi's integrated file system naming format. It is the most common understood by other platforms in the modern. So my recommendation is that you change your defaults to use the integrated file system naming format with your FTP. That's relatively simple to do. If we jump over to a green screen and we want to enter change FTP attributes, hit F4. And we want to change the initial name format and the initial directory defaults on the FTP attributes. So we're going to use star path and home directory. That should do it. Now let's switch back over to FileZilla and connect to our IBMi. I wanted to mention before we actually connect that everything that we're doing here in this video is making the assumption that you're within the VPN or within the firewall of the network. You should never open your IBMi directly to the internet. I would work with your network security guys to make sure that you have the firewall set up and then a tunnel through any of the ports that you might want to open up. So again, just to confirm, this is all being done within the same network, so the IP addresses are internal to the network. So let's go ahead and we'll key in the IP address of our IBMi. Standard IBMi user ID and password. You can leave the port blank. The default port is 21. So now here we have a message, and I wanted to highlight this. It may be possible when you try and do this on your IBMi that you don't have TLS set up. So the quick connect is assuming that you have some sort of security rather than plain text. Now, plain text isn't necessarily bad if you're within your own network and firewall. You never want to have just plain text FTP if you're dealing with outside sources. So I'll show you a quick workaround on this to get past this if you do see this when you try this on your own IBMi. So what we'll do is we're going to go up to the Site Manager and we're going to select the login or the encryption type for our connection, and we just want to use plain. So now when we go back and we try and connect, we get the connection to our IBMi, and you can see the QIBM directory. So you are all set up and ready to start dragging and dropping FTP back and forth between your local machine and your IBMi, or a remote machine and your IBMi. Hi everyone, Jeffrey with Treeline Solutions again. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We hope that you look for our additional videos in the future, and if you want any more information about Treeline Solutions and our services, please visit our website. Take care. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.